Admiral Kyung-ho stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable and watched the stars through the main window. The ship was massive, bigger than any building back on Earth. It was humanity's pride, their strongest warship that protected the solar system. Around him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. The soft hum of computers filled the air. It was just another normal day in space. The fleet was doing routine patrol near Jupiter's moons. Nothing exciting ever happened out here. Most days were boring, which was exactly how Kyung-ho liked it. Boring meant safe. Boring meant everyone went home to their families. "Admiral," called Communications Officer Hai-jin from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with quick fingers that danced across her keyboard. "I'm getting something strange on the long-range array." Kyung-ho walked over to her station. "What kind of strange?" "It's a signal, sir. But it's not from any of our ships, and it's not from Earth either." Hai-jin frowned at her screen. "Actually, I don't think it's from anywhere in our solar system." The Admiral felt his heart beat faster. In the 200 years since humans had learned to travel between planets, they had never found anyone else. No aliens, no other intelligent life, nothing but empty space and dead rocks. Scientists said the universe was too big for humans to be alone, but so far they were wrong. "Put it on speakers," Kyung-ho ordered. The bridge filled with a crackling sound. Then came a voice, but it was unlike anything they had ever heard. It was not human. The words were in a language that sounded like music mixed with the wind. But underneath the strange sounds, everyone could hear something they understood perfectly. "Fear. Can you clean it up?" Kyung-ho asked. Hai-jin worked quickly, her fingers flying over the controls. Slowly, the static faded. The alien voice became clearer. Even though they could not understand the words, the emotion was clear. This was a cry for help. "Get Dr. Young-e up here," the Admiral said, "and wake up the computer language programs." Dr. Young-e arrived within minutes. She was the fleet's best scientist, an expert in languages and communication. She had studied every human language and even created new ways for computers to talk to each other. If anyone could figure out what the aliens were saying, it was her. "This is incredible," she whispered as she listened to the signal. "The mathematical structure of their language is completely different from ours. But there are patterns. Give me an hour." While Young-e worked, more information came through the quantum array. The signal was coming from the direction of Vega, a bright star that was 25 light-years away. That was incredibly far, even for their fastest ships. The signal had been traveling through space for 25 years before reaching Earth. Captain Dong-soo arrived on the bridge. He was the commander of the Swift Arrow, one of their fastest scout ships. "What's the situation, Admiral?" "We might have first contact," Kyung-ho said quietly. Dong-soo's eyes went wide. "Aliens? Maybe. We're still working on translating their message." An hour later, Young-e looked up from her work. Her face was pale. "I've got something. It's not a complete translation, but I understand the basic meaning." She took a deep breath. "They're calling for help. Their worlds are under attack. They're being destroyed by something they call the Devourers." The bridge went silent. Everyone stopped what they were doing. "They say they've been fighting for 3 years," Young-e continued. "But they're losing. They're sending this message to anyone who might hear it, hoping someone will help them." Kyung-ho felt a chill run down his back. "How many of them are there?" "I think they're talking about entire planets. Billions of people, maybe more, and they're dying." Chief Engineer So-young's voice came through the communicator. "Admiral, I've been listening to the conversation. I need to say something important. Our ships weren't built for this kind of mission. We're designed to protect our solar system, not fight wars on the other side of the galaxy." "How long would it take us to get there?" Kyung-ho asked. "With our newest jump drives? Maybe 6 months. But that's if everything works perfectly, and we don't know what we'll find when we arrive." Captain Dong-soo stepped forward. "Admiral, we have to do something. These people are crying out for help. How can we just ignore them? Because it might be a trap." So-young's voice crackled through the speaker. "We don't know anything about these aliens. We don't know who's attacking them or why. We could be flying into an ambush." Kyung-ho looked around the bridge. His crew was watching him, waiting for his decision. Through the window, he could see other ships in the fleet. 12 ships total. Not very many compared to the armies that had fought wars on Earth. But they were all humanity had. He thought about the message they had received. Even though he could not understand the words, he had heard the fear and desperation in the alien voice. It reminded him of stories his grandfather had told him about the wars on Earth, when people cried out for help and sometimes no one came. "Young E," he said finally, "how sure are you about the translation?" 90%, sir. They're definitely asking for help. And they're definitely dying. Kyung-ho closed his eyes and thought about his family back on Earth. His wife and daughter were safe in their home in Seoul. If Earth was under attack and they sent out a distress call, he would want someone to answer. He would want someone to care enough to try. "So Young," he called into the communicator, "how long do you need to prepare the fleet for a long-range mission?" "Sir, are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying we answer the call. Start preparing the ships. We leave as soon as possible." Admiral Dongsu said quietly, "What if we can't help them? What if we're too late?" Kyung-ho looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, people were dying while calling for help. Maybe humans could save them. Maybe they could not. But he knew they had to try. Then at least they'll know they weren't alone, he said. The space around Vega looked like a nightmare. Admiral Kyung-ho stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and stared through the main window at the destruction ahead of them. 3 planets burned in the distance, their surfaces glowing red and orange. Massive ships, each one bigger than any city on Earth, moved slowly around the dying worlds like giant metal insects. "My God," whispered Communications Officer Hyejin. "What are those things?" The alien ships were unlike anything humans had ever imagined. They were perfectly geometric, all sharp angles and smooth surfaces. They looked more like buildings than spacecraft. And they were huge. The smallest one was at least 10 kilometers long. "Those must be the Devourers," said Dr. Youngie. She was studying the readings on her screen. "They're harvesting the planets. Look at this data. They're stripping away the atmosphere, the oceans, even the rock itself." Fleet Tactical Officer Minho was working quickly at his station. "Admiral, I count 40 enemy vessels. They're arranged in 3 groups, one around each planet. They don't seem to have noticed us yet." "How is that possible?" asked Captain Dongsu. "We're not exactly small." "I think they're busy," Minho replied, "and maybe they don't expect anyone to come here. According to their patterns, they've been doing this for a long time." Youngie's voice was excited. "Admiral, I'm getting a signal from the outer planet. It's the same language as the distress call, but this one is local." "Put it through," Kyung-ho ordered. The alien voice filled the bridge again. This time it sounded even more desperate than before. Youngie worked quickly to translate the basic meaning. "They're on some kind of space station," she said. "The last survivors of their fleet. They're asking who we are and how we got here." "Tell them we received their message and came to help," the Admiral said. Young A spoke into her communicator in the alien language. Her pronunciation was not perfect, but the computer helped her get the basic sounds right. A few minutes later, they received a reply. "They want to talk to our leader," Young A translated. "They're sending coordinates for a meeting." The coordinates led them to a space station orbiting the furthest planet. It was badly damaged, with whole sections blown away or melted by enemy fire, but it was still alive, still fighting. "This is incredible," Youngie said as they got closer. "I'm getting visual contact." The main screen showed the inside of an alien command center. The beings they saw there made everyone on the bridge gasp. They were tall and thin, covered in smooth scales that changed color in the light. They had 4 arms and large eyes that seemed to see everything at once, but despite how different they looked, their expressions were easy to understand. They were afraid, tired, and desperate. One of the aliens stepped forward. When it spoke, Young A translated quickly. "This is Commander Velthera of the Villani Defense Force. She's asking how we crossed the void between stars to reach them. Tell her we came because we heard their call for help," Kyung-ho said. When Young A translated this, something amazing happened. Commander Velthara's scales brightened, and her large eyes filled with what looked like tears. "She says they never imagined anyone else existed," Young A translated. "They thought they were alone in the universe. She's asking how many ships we brought." Kyung-ho felt his heart sink. "Tell her 12. When the number was translated, the aliens looked confused. Commander Velthara spoke again, and her voice sounded concerned. "She's asking if 12 is our word for a very large number," Youngie said quietly. "No," Kyung-ho replied. "Tell her exactly what it means." The effect was immediate. The aliens began talking quickly among themselves. Their scales darkened with what looked like fear. Commander Velthara spoke again, and this time her voice was gentle but sad. She says the Devourers have destroyed 17 civilizations, Youngie translated. Each one had thousands of ships and weapons far more advanced than anything she can see on our vessels. She's grateful that we came, but she thinks we're going to die here. Captain Jinwoo's voice came through the communicator from his destroyer, the Thunderbolt. Admiral, I've been listening to this conversation. I have an idea. Go ahead, Captain. What if our weakness is actually our strength? These aliens and all the others who were destroyed probably relied on advanced computers and artificial intelligence for their defense. But humans still do things manually. We still make decisions with our hearts instead of just our heads. Minho looked up from his tactical display. He's right, sir. I've been studying the Devourer movement patterns. They're perfectly logical, perfectly predictable. They do everything the most efficient way possible. So? Kyung-ho asked. So maybe that's why they always win. They figure out how their enemies think. Then they beat them using superior logic and technology. But humans don't always think logically. Dr. Youngie was nodding excitedly. That makes sense. If these Devourers are some kind of machine intelligence, they might not understand human intuition and creativity. Commander Velthara spoke again. Youngie listened and then translated. She's explaining how the Devourers fight. They adapt to their enemies' weapons and tactics very quickly. Usually within hours, their shields become immune to whatever attacks them. What about close combat? Asked Captain Jinwoo. Youngie asked the question and translated the reply. She says no one has ever gotten close enough to try. The Devourers destroy ships from long range. Kyung-ho studied the tactical display showing the enemy positions. The Devourers were arranged in perfect formations around each planet. Every ship was exactly where it should be for maximum efficiency. It was beautiful in a cold mathematical way. Minho, he said, if you were commanding those ships, what would be the last thing you'd expect an enemy to do? The tactical officer thought for a moment. Probably a direct frontal assault with inferior numbers and weaker weapons. Because it would be stupid? Completely insane, sir. Kyung-ho smiled for the first time since they had arrived. Perfect. Tell the fleet to prepare for combat. We're going to do something so crazy that no computer will see it coming. Commander. Velthara must have understood some of what was happening because she spoke urgently to Youngie. She's begging us not to attack, Youngie translated. She says we'll be destroyed in minutes. Tell her that humans have been doing impossible things for thousands of years, Kyung-ho replied. And tell her to watch carefully. She might learn something. As the human fleet moved toward the enemy, every person on every ship knew they were probably about to die. The odds were terrible. The enemy was stronger, more advanced, and had them outnumbered more than 3-1. But they also knew something the Devourers did not. Sometimes the best strategy was to have no strategy at all. Sometimes the only way to win was to be completely, beautifully unpredictable. The battle for the Vega system was about to begin. The first shots came from the Devourers exactly as Minho had predicted. Perfect calculated beams of energy that should have destroyed the lead human ships instantly. But Captain Tae-hyun of the frigate Defiant was not flying where the computers expected him to be. Instead of approaching in a straight line like any logical commander would do, Tae-hyun was spinning his ship in a wild spiral, using the gravity of a nearby moon to change direction every few seconds. The Devourer targeting systems had calculated where he should be, but he was somewhere completely different. This is insane, laughed Tae-hyun over the communication channel. I have no idea where I'm going next. That was exactly the point. If the pilot did not know what he was going to do, then no computer could predict it either. Admiral Kyung-ho watched from the bridge of the Indomitable as his small fleet scattered in all directions. To anyone watching, it looked like panic. The ships were flying in random patterns with no clear plan. But that was the plan. So Young, he called to his chief engineer. How are those power modifications coming? Almost ready, sir, came the reply from the engine room. But I have to warn you, if we push the reactors this hard, we might blow up our own ship. Will it give us more firepower? Oh yes, sir. About 3 times more than normal. For maybe 10 minutes before everything melts. Do it. Chief Engineer So Young had spent the last 6 months studying every detail of their ship's systems. She knew exactly which safety rules could be broken and which ones absolutely could not. Right now, she was breaking about half of them. The human weapons were not as advanced as the Devourer shields, but they had one advantage. They were unpredictable. While alien weapons fired in perfect patterns that computers could easily adapt to, human gunners were making tiny adjustments with every shot. Gunner specialist Nari was flying her fighter through the enemy formation, firing her weapons in what looked like a random pattern. But it was not random to her. She was aiming at whatever looked interesting, changing targets whenever she felt like it, following her instincts instead of any tactical computer. "Got one," she shouted as her shots punched through a Devourer shield that had been expecting a completely different attack pattern. The Devourer ship she hit did not explode like in the movies. Instead, it simply stopped moving and began drifting in space. But for the Devourers, this was catastrophic. They had not lost a ship in over 50 years. Commander Velthera watched the battle from her damaged space station. Her scales kept changing colors as she tried to understand what she was seeing. The humans were fighting like no species she had ever encountered. "They are not following any known tactical doctrine," she said to her officers. "Their movements make no sense. But somehow, they are hitting us." Dr. Young-A was still translating the alien communications, but now she was also monitoring the Devourer network. "Admiral, I'm picking up chatter from the enemy ships. They sound confused. What are they saying? They keep asking each other to confirm target data. Their computers keep losing track of our ships." This was exactly what Minho had hoped for. The Devourer ships were designed to fight predictable enemies. Their targeting systems were built to track logical flight patterns and counter-organized tactics. But humans were not being logical or organized. Captain Jinwoo pushed his destroyer Thunderbolt into a steep dive toward the planet's surface. He was using the atmosphere as a shield, flying so low that the enemy could not get a clear shot, without risking damage to the planet they were trying to harvest. "This is either brilliant or suicidal," he muttered as his ship shook from atmospheric. "Entry, why not both?" replied his co-pilot. But the real surprise came when Minho made his decision. His tactical ship was smaller than the others, not really designed for direct combat, but he had been studying the Devourer formation and noticed something important. "Admiral," he called over the communication channel, "their ships are networked together. If I can get close enough to the command vessel, I might be able to disrupt their entire coordination system." "How close?" Kyung-ho asked. "Very close, sir." Everyone understood what he meant. To disrupt their network, he would have to ram his ship directly into theirs. "Minho, that's a suicide mission." "Yes, sir, but it might save the others." Kyung-ho felt his heart break. These were his people, his responsibility. But he also knew that Minho was right. One ship might be able to do what the entire fleet could not. "Do it," he said quietly. Minho's ship broke away from the main battle and flew straight toward the largest Devourer vessel. He was not trying to avoid their weapons or confuse their targeting systems. He was flying in a perfectly straight line, as fast as his engines could push him. The Devourers were so surprised by this direct approach that they almost missed their chance to shoot him down. When they finally fired, Minho's ship was already too close. Their weapons hit him, but not before he crashed into their command ship's hull. The explosion was huge. Minho's reactor overloaded at the moment of impact, creating a chain reaction that tore through both ships. But more importantly, it sent a massive electromagnetic pulse through the Devourer network. Suddenly, 40 enemy ships lost their coordination. They stopped moving in perfect formation and began flying in confused circles. Some of them even fired on each other by mistake. "Now," shouted Admiral Kyung-ho. "All ships, full attack!" The human fleet struck while the enemy was confused. So Young's overloaded reactors gave them the firepower they needed to punch through Devourer shields. Nari and the other pilots flew attack patterns that made no sense but somehow worked perfectly. Captain Taehyun led a group of ships in a direct assault on the second planet's harvesting operation. His approach was so wild and unpredictable that the Devourers could not figure out how to respond. The battle lasted for 6 hours. When it was over, 15 Devourer ships were destroyed or disabled. The rest had done something that shocked Commander Velthara more than anything else. They retreated. "I do not understand," she said to Young-A during the post-battle communication. "The Devourers never retreat. They fight until they win or until they are completely destroyed." "Maybe they couldn't figure out how to beat us," Young-A replied. "But your ships are so small. Your weapons are so primitive." "Yes, but we're human. We don't always make sense, even to ourselves." The victory had come at a cost. 3 human ships were lost, including Minho's tactical vessel. Brave people had died far from home, fighting for aliens they had never met before today. But Vega the Third was saved. For the first time in over 50 years, the Devourers had been defeated in battle. And something even more important had happened. The galaxy had learned that there was a new kind of warrior among the stars. As the human fleet began rescue operations for the surviving Villani, Admiral Kyung-ho thought about Min-ho and the others who had sacrificed everything. They had proven that sometimes the impossible was just another word for human. The news traveled faster than anyone expected. Within days of the battle at Vega, Dr. Young-A began receiving strange signals from across the galaxy. They were not random transmissions, but careful, hopeful messages from species that had been hiding in the darkness for years. "Admiral," she said excitedly as she burst onto the bridge, "you need to hear this. We're getting contact requests from at least 12 different civilizations." Admiral Kyung-ho looked up from the repair reports he had been reading. The human fleet had won the battle, but barely. Half their ships needed major repairs, and they had lost too many good people. What kind of contact requests? They all heard about what happened here from the Villani. Word is spreading that someone finally beat the Devourers in battle. Young-A's voice was filled with wonder. "Admiral, we're not alone anymore. None of us are." The first species to make contact called themselves the Corvani Collective. They lived in a massive asteroid belt between two dead stars, hiding their civilization inside hollowed-out rocks. When their representatives arrived, they looked like walking crystals with lights that pulsed when they talked. "We have been hiding for 80 years, their leader told Young-A through a translation device they had built. "When the Devourers destroyed our homeworld, we thought all hope was lost. But you have shown us that they can be defeated." The second contact came from the Zephyrian Republic, beings made of pure energy who lived in the atmosphere of gas giant planets. They appeared as glowing clouds of light that could somehow think and speak. "We have watched 17 civilizations fall," their ambassador communicated through radio waves. "Each time we wanted to help, but we were too afraid. We are not warriors like you humans." More species appeared every day. The Thornari, who looked like living trees with faces carved in their bark. The Aquari, who had to wear water-filled suits to survive outside their ocean worlds. The Makani, who were organic beings that had merged with their own technology to become something between machine and animal. Each species had the same story. They had been advanced civilizations until the Devourers found them. Some had fought and lost. Others had hidden before the machines could discover them. All of them had thought they were the only survivors. Engineer Wan Jin worked day and night with alien scientists to understand the technology they had recovered from the destroyed Devourer ships. "This is incredible," he told Admiral Kyung-ho during one of their meetings. "Their technology is centuries ahead of ours, but it's also completely different." "Different how?" "They design everything for maximum efficiency. Every system is perfectly optimized for one specific task. But that also means their technology can't adapt to unexpected situations, like humans being unpredictable." "Exactly. Their shields are designed to counter specific types of weapons fired in specific patterns. When we changed our firing patterns randomly, their systems couldn't figure out how to respond." Communications specialist Yoon-ji was having the time of her life. She was learning new languages faster than she had ever thought possible, helped by translation computers that each species contributed to the growing alliance. "Admiral," she reported during their daily briefing, "I've established communication protocols with 15 different species now. They're all asking the same question: when do we fight back?" But Intelligence Officer Jae-sung brought disturbing news. "Sir, I've been analyzing the Devourer communication logs we captured. They're studying us. They recorded everything from our battle, and they're running simulations to figure out how to beat us next time." Admiral Kyung-ho felt a chill. "How long do we have?" "Based on their previous patterns, maybe 6 months. But sir, that's not the worst part." Jae-sung's face was grim. "They're mobilizing their entire local fleet. Over 300 ships, and they're all heading toward Earth." The bridge went silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The Devourers had identified humanity as the biggest threat to their expansion. They were going to destroy Earth before the humans could cause any more trouble. Captain Dong-soo spoke first. "We have to go back. We have to warn Earth and help with the defense." "But what about our allies?" asked Young-A. "If we leave now, the Devourers might come back and finish what they started here." "And if we stay," replied Dong-soo, "Earth dies." It was Commander Velthara who offered a solution. She had been working closely with the human fleet since the battle, learning their tactics and sharing Villani technology. "What if we all go together?" she suggested. "Every species, every ship that can fight. We make our stand at Earth." "That's crazy," said Wanjin. "Most of these species have never worked together before. We don't even know if our technologies are compatible." Ensign Hansol, the youngest officer on the bridge, suddenly looked up from his station. "Sir, what if that's exactly why it might work?" Everyone turned to look at him. The young man blushed but continued speaking. "The Devourers expect logical tactics and organized military formations. But what if we show up with dozens of different species, all using different technologies and fighting styles? They won't be able to predict what we'll do because we won't know what we're doing either." Admiral Kyung-ho stared at the young ensign. It was completely insane. A fleet made up of species who had never fought together, using incompatible technologies and completely different tactical doctrines. No military commander in history would ever approve such a plan. "Hansol," he said slowly, "that might be the craziest idea I've ever heard." "Thank you, sir," which means it's perfect. The Devourers will never see it coming because no rational being would ever try it. Over the next 2 months, something unprecedented happened. Species that had been hiding in fear for decades began emerging from their shelters. They brought ships of every imaginable design, weapons that used technologies humans had never dreamed of, and most importantly, hope. The Corvani contributed ships that could phase in and out of reality. The Zephyrians offered energy weapons that could strike through any shield. The Thornari brought living ships that could repair themselves in battle. Each species added something unique to the growing fleet, but they also brought problems. Corvani ships needed crystal-based power sources that were toxic to most other species. Zephyrian energy beings could not survive in the cold vacuum that most others preferred. Thornari vessels required soil and sunlight to function properly. Wan Jin and his international team of engineers worked miracles to make everything compatible. They created universal docking systems, multi-species life support networks, and communication arrays that could handle dozens of different languages at once. It's like building a spaceship out of spare parts from 15 different planets. Wan Jin complained to anyone who would listen. "Half of this stuff shouldn't work together." "But it does work?" asked Admiral Kyung-ho. "Somehow, yes. I have no idea how, but yes." As the combined fleet prepared to leave for Earth, Admiral Kyung-ho stood on the bridge and looked out at the most unusual military force in galactic history. There were sleek Villani warships next to organic Thornari vessels. Crystal Corvani fighters flew alongside glowing Zephyrian energy clouds. Human ships looked tiny and primitive compared to some of their allies, but they were the glue holding everything together. "Admiral," reported Yunji, "we're receiving a message from Earth. They've detected the Devourer fleet. 300 ships just like Jae-sung predicted. They'll reach the solar system in 2 weeks. And how long will it take us to get there?" 10 days, sir. If nothing breaks down." Kyung-ho looked around at his bridge crew. Young-A was teaching Villani officers how to understand human tactical commands. Wonjin was arguing with a Corvani engineer about power distribution. Yunji was somehow managing to coordinate communication between 15 different species all at once. They were about to attempt something that had never been done before. A coordinated defense by species who had barely met each other, using technologies that should not work together, against an enemy that had never been defeated in a full-scale battle. "All ships," he announced over the fleet communication channel, "prepare for jump to Earth, we're going home." Earth looked beautiful and small as the Devourer fleet emerged from jump space near Jupiter. Admiral Kyung-ho watched from the bridge of the Indomitable, as 300 enemy ships arranged themselves in perfect formation, blocking all routes to humanity's homeworld. "My God," whispered Captain Dongsu, "there are so many of them." The Devourer ships were larger than the ones they had fought at Vega. These were not just harvesting vessels, but true warships, built for the complete destruction of entire civilizations. Each one was the size of a small moon, covered in weapons that could crack planets. "All human vessels, this is Earth Defense Command," came a transmission from the planet. "We have 57 ships ready for battle, including civilian vessels with mounted weapons. The Sol defense grid is online and ready." Captain Bongsu was coordinating the evacuation of Mars colonies while the defense fleet prepared for battle. Millions of people were being moved to shelters deep underground. But everyone knew that if the fleet lost, nowhere would be safe. "Admiral, reported communications specialist Yunji. I'm getting status reports from our allied fleet. Everyone is in position. Kyung-ho looked at the tactical display showing their combined forces. It was the strangest military formation in history. Human ships flew alongside crystalline Corvani vessels. Organic Thornari warships moved in formation with energy-based Zephyrian fighters. The Volani fleet had integrated their targeting systems with human tactical computers. How many ships total? He asked. 137, sir. From 16 different species. Against 300 Devourer warships, it was still impossible odds. But this time, humanity was not alone. All vessels, Kyung-ho announced over the fleet communication channel. Remember what we learned at Vega. The Devourers expect logical tactics and predictable behavior, so we're going to give them chaos. The battle began exactly as no military strategist had ever planned. Instead of organized formations, the Allied fleet scattered in all directions. Corvani ships phased in and out of reality, appearing behind enemy lines and disappearing before the Devourers could target them. Zephyrian energy beings flowed through space like living lightning, striking at enemy sensors and communication arrays. Engineer So Young had taught her alien counterparts the human concept of creative problem-solving. When the Thornari ships began taking damage, their crews started using their living vessels, natural healing abilities in ways that had never been tried before. The ship says it wants to grow more armor, reported a Thornari captain through the translation system. Tell it to grow whatever it thinks will help, So Young replied. We'll figure out how to use it later. The Devourer fleet tried to adapt to their enemy's tactics, but there were too many different fighting styles to counter. Every time their computers figured out how to counter one species' attacks, 3 other species would strike using completely different methods. Pilot Nari led a combined squadron of human fighters and Volani interceptors through the enemy formation. She had learned to work with alien pilots who thought and moved in ways no human ever could. Follow my lead, she called to her mixed squadron. We're going to try something new. What she tried was a combat maneuver that combined human unpredictability with Volani precision flying. The result was an attack pattern that looked like controlled chaos but hit the enemy exactly where they were most vulnerable. But the real turning point came when young Ensign Hansol put his crazy plan into action. He had convinced crews from 7 different species to attempt a coordinated assault on the Devourer command ship, using technologies that had never been combined before. This is either going to be brilliant or it's going to kill us all, muttered Wonjin as he watched the mixed assault team approach the enemy. Flagship human ships provided covering fire while Corvani vessels phased the assault team past the enemy shields. Zephyrian energy beings disrupted the Devourer targeting systems while Thornari living ships tangled with enemy fighters like plants growing around obstacles. The assault team reached the command ship's hull and began their attack. But instead of trying to destroy it, they were doing something much more dangerous. They were confusing it. Hansol had realized that the Devourer fleet was controlled by a single massive computer network. If they could feed that network enough contradictory information, it might overload trying to process all the variables. Human hackers worked alongside Volani computer specialists and Corvani crystal-based data processors. Together, they began injecting random data into the Devourer network. False sensor readings, fake tactical reports, and completely fictional battle scenarios. It's working, shouted Youngie from her station. The enemy ships are starting to move erratically. The Devourer network was designed to process logical information and make rational decisions. But the Allied fleet was feeding it data that made no sense. Reports of ships in 2 places at once, weapons that fired in impossible directions, and battle tactics that violated every known rule of warfare. The mighty Devourer computer began to have what humans would call a nervous breakdown. Some enemy ships stopped moving entirely. Others began firing on their own allies. A few started flying in circles, their navigation systems completely confused by the contradictory data they were receiving. Now, shouted Admiral Kyung-ho, all ships full assault. The combined fleet struck while the enemy was paralyzed by confusion. Every species fought in their own unique way, but somehow it all worked together. Human ships provided covering fire for Corvani phasing attacks. Volani precision targeting guided Thornari living weapons. Zephyrian energy strikes overwhelmed enemy shields that had been weakened by Aquari sonic attacks. The battle was chaos, but it was beautiful chaos. For the first time in galactic history, dozens of species were fighting as one, each contributing their unique strengths to a victory that none of them could have achieved alone. When the last Devourer's ship either surrendered or fled into deep space, the Allied fleet found itself floating in the wreckage of the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen. "Admiral," reported Yunji, "we're receiving transmissions from all over the galaxy. Dozens more species are asking to join our alliance." Admiral Kyung-ho looked out at Earth, still blue and beautiful and safe. Around the planet, ships from 16 different worlds floated together in victory. It was the beginning of something that had never existed before. A true galactic community. Commander Velthera's image appeared on the main screen. Her scales were bright with joy. "Admiral Kyung-ho, on behalf of all our species, I want to thank humanity for showing us that the impossible is just another word for not tried yet." "What happens now?" asked Captain Dong-Soo. Kyung-ho smiled as he watched the mixed fleet of human and alien ships beginning rescue operations. "Now we build something better. A galaxy where no one has to face their fears alone." The distress call that had started it all had become humanity's promise to the stars. "When you call, we answer. No matter how far, no matter the odds, and in a galaxy full of wonders and dangers, that promise had become the foundation of hope itself.